Hello everyone, thank you for joining. So if you have already have an RSAC membership and you are interested in joining a group conversation, you can search in RSAC community platform using speaker's name and session title. So I'd like to introduce the speaker, Deanna, and I'd like her to start the conversation.
Thank you. Okay. Had to advance there. All right, thank you very much. I am Diana Kelly, and I'm currently the CISO at Protect AI, and I'm very excited to have this amazing panel here to have a conversation about shadow AI. How many folks are worried about shadow AI in your organization? Is that why you showed up? Okay, so that's almost unanimous. All right, guys, you got to help them. They got to walk out of here with knowing exactly how to get rid of their shadow.
Now I was going to ask the guys that didn't raise your hands, why did you come to this session? Sorry.
For curiosity. All right, so starting on my far right over here, we have Michael Bernhardt, who is the Director of Information Security at Dativ. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Next to him is John Dixon, who is the CEO at ByteWhisper.
Howdy.
He's also from Texas, in case you didn't check that out. And not from Texas, right next to me here is Anton Shuhakin, who is the Security Advisor at the Office of the CISO at Google.
Perfect. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, glad you're here. Okay, so we're going to allow for questions. If you have a burning question throughout this, I'm going to leave questions at the end, but honestly, we've got to flow. We were anticipating what you might be interested in hearing, but if we're not answering the question you really have that you need us to answer, please go up to the mic at any time, and as soon as the last question has been completed, we're more than happy to take your answers as we're going. All right, you guys ready to go? All right, let's get started. So sort of just as a bit of a level set, John, I was wondering if you could start us out with what the heck is shadow AI?
Well, as luck would have it, I hopped on ChatGPT right before this and looked it up. No, it's the unauthorized, unknown, use of AI in the enterprise. That's obvious, right? I mean, it's an obvious statement. The big difference, and we'll talk about it, I think, is the fact at how quickly the AI adoption has happened. And unlike IT, which evolved over decades, this has happened so quickly that you see, individuals trying to get ahead of things and listen to what the CEO and the exec is trying to talk about, and they're just doing it. So the speed and the velocity, that's the big difference, but it's the unauthorized use of it, and we'll talk about what that means.
Okay. And Michael, you had some interesting thoughts about, predictive AI and ML as shadow versus Gen AI or shadow. I was wondering if you could first explain a little bit of what the difference between predictive and generative AI, why those are different shadows, and then maybe launch a little bit about the telecoms that you were talking about dealing with.
Happy to do so. I mean, Gen AI most likely is familiar with all of you. Somebody may have used OpenAI or other LLMs that are out there. And I mean, that are the kind of AIs that are where you are interacting as a human being. You put kind of in some questions, for example, what is AI, right? Like John did. So, and we get an answer, we take this forward. We can also incorporate this into our products. Predictive AI is another beast, I would say, because it comes as kind of giving you the AI out of a sudden coming into the leap or going into the forefront of making a decision. And by that, what Diana mentioned, from my past career in the telecommunication business, there come up some quite interesting aspects of that. So when you consider, for example, the planning of a network, telecommunication network, you have two phases. The first thing is the design phase. And in the design phase, you can use an AI to build up an efficient network in the sense of you are kind of a company, you want to make money, so you want to have the right level or the right amount of antennas, but not more. Still, in the design phase, you still have enough time to have this corrected by a human being if there was an error. But then the second aspect is the runtime aspect. And the runtime aspect is a kind of a load balancing aspect. That means the network needs to react to certain aspects when, for example, there is a conference going on like it is here. Out of a sudden, you need more bandwidth, so to say. And also that is driven then by a predictive AI agent, so to say, coming into the game. And if you cannot rely on the AI being in place in there, you know the math what this means.
And Anton, I love that your take on this is looking at cloud, which you know quite a lot about, and reasonable expectations. What should we be expecting and thinking about what we can do with Shadow AI?
I think the rapid pace of adoption was mentioned briefly, but I also see that things we observe with Shadow AI adoption, and by the way, I have a minor tweak to a definition because a lot of people probably here in the audience assume that Shadow AI implies consumer-grade tools being used for business by employees, but there's also, of course, the unauthorized adoption of business-grade tools by departments, by teams. So I don't want to necessarily say type 1 and type 2, but when we think about tracking this phenomena, we kind of look at the consumer-grade that has its own separate bucket of risks and the business-grade but without authorization. So with that aside, some people who I see who perhaps tend to observe most new things as a variation of old things basically told me, Shadow AI, there's nothing to it. It's just like how we adopted SaaS, how CEO showed up with an iPhone in 2008 and said, IT, make it work. And so they see mostly similarities, and they look at the governance practices, they look at other things that worked for rapid adoption of software as a service 10, 15 years ago, rapid adoption of, say, mobile devices, post-BlackBerry era, and say, we'll just do the same thing. And we'll be okay because we were okay in the past. And that's where the parallels with cloud come up. Some things would certainly be okay, but other things would not be okay, not only because of speed, but also because adoption is by pretty much every employee, no matter how non-technical, and also the breadth of use cases. To me, this falls into the differences bucket. And some of the things we learned from dealing with other shadow IT technologies may not automatically work. So to me, that's why I study how we adopted things in the past and what shadow things showed up in our enterprises, and then what lessons we can apply and what lessons we have to reinvent.
Yeah.
There is a bucket of that too.
I was going to add one thing to that thought, Anton, and that is the two different classes, the consumer grade and the business grade. What we see out in the client base are the architects, the developers, the technology leadership that are downloading Hugging Face and trying to maybe hit an API. So what I counsel clients is worry about that a lot. And don't worry about, did we use Grammarly on the desktop, for example, as comparison. The one thing I'd also like to say is I have two clients, they don't have this problem at all. And I just caution the audience, they don't have this problem at all because they had a very draconian AI policy. And as a result, they don't have any, or they really shadow AI, and they're proud of it, except for one thing, they don't have any AI at all. So I think shadow AI is actually not a bad thing. So what's worse than shadow AI? No shadow AI.
I mean,
That means your entire team is doing nothing. They're just sitting there doing nothing. So in a competitive world, you're losing.
I think that remark is in the script somewhere, not that we have a script. But I'm also surprised these two clients actually don't have AI, because I've seen some examples where abandonment adoption have increased, just more secretly. And it's almost like reminds me of some probably quite mythical email where the CISO sends an email saying ChatGPT is banned in our company, and those three people who never heard what it is go look it up and say, wow, that's actually amazing. I can do it on my mobile phone. I don't need these corporate rules. And suddenly adoption goes up. So I've seen that when if they don't have it, they probably actually do. It's just even more ungoverned.
One caveat, they're both public sector clients, and they're all risk averse. So they're probably not doing it because that's an excuse not to do it.
What about their interns?
Yeah, probably
They're risk averse.
Their interns are totally doing it. Absolutely.
And it is, so, a couple other aspects of shadow AI, Michael was touching on this is sort of with the OT side, is that sometimes we think of AI as starting in November 2023 when ChatGPT was introduced, but if you were in big pharma or you were in financial services, you had hundreds, maybe thousands of machine learning AI models in your organization well before 2023. And they, in some ways, were working in the shadows. They were very segmented, very cordoned off. But now this adoption is coming more into the organization. And I would also say that when you look at commercial versus one-to-one private use, you start thinking about I don't think we can get away from AI. Whether you like it or not, Microsoft and Google in your productivity suite are sharing, you've got AI. Developers are using AI to start to generate code. So I mean, it is it's truly everywhere. So I think that when we talk about the shadow, it's sort of a complex shadow with a lot of leaves that are all over your org. Michael, it looked like you were about to say something off of what I said.
Yes, just also picking up on the point, I could also not imagine how any company would not use this. I mean, it's on the one hand side, the curiosity of the employees in getting on there, using open source models, just trying it out, just going out on the SaaS services that are there in trying this. I would wonder how a policy-based company would even ruin this in the sense of all employees not using this. But the second aspect is also when it comes to commercial products. Can we differentiate when we buy a product today whether it contains some kind of an LLM or anything?
Embedding. That's right. Yep.
Right, yeah. I think it's going to be like sub-processors. We have to show all our subs. At some point we're going to have. But okay, so we've kind of started to touch on this, but I think that we've got an audience here who's struggling with shadow AI. So Anton, why is this so hard?
Actually, there's a fork in the road. I can focus on how messed up the problem is, or I can focus on how messed up our environments are. And I face a choice which road to take. I think the right road may offend the audience a little bit, but the first road may be a little inaccurate. So I think I'll go both. I'll be an analyst and say it depends. First thing is speed of adoption, broad use cases. It means the problem is harder.
Anton used to work at Gartner, so when he says he's going to be a bit of an analyst, that's what he's hearkening back to in his past. Yeah.
That's right. I still have the ex-analyst hat. But I feel like the other challenge is that it's not only that the new thing is complex and interesting, but that we are really not very well adopted to it. And if today I say, you know, I have this magic answer to how to fix shadow AI, you should just do governance better, half of you would go to sleep, half of you would just hate me for giving useless advice. But in that sense, that's true, right? We do need to evolve governance so it works, but we haven't yet. So that's why it's really hard. So I'm taking the in-between route. Problem is hard, but also we are sort of uniquely unready for it.
Yeah.
I was going to say that the organizations we work with that have healthy adoptions have solid policies, solid governance, well understood, and they're engaging that technical leadership, and they're ignoring everybody else. So again, the dev managers, the architects, the folks that are going to make consequential decisions around this, they are very engaged, and so that I like. And then the other thing they've done is, they reward the curiosity. I mean, you want to reward that. The CEOs have to come out and say, we're doing this, but this is how, and it's a good thing.
Yeah. Michael, you had a point when we were talking about this earlier about learning by adoption. It sort of feeds into what John was saying. I was wondering if you could expand on that and how that might actually help us shine the light on shadow AI.
Very good point, and I would say there is something in the middle between completely denying AI would come into the company and allowing it all full-fledged and letting this in. And I would say it's accommodate, so to say, the adoption of the company. And a crucial aspect that I consider quite vital in seeing also how in the last 3, 4, 5 years companies have built it up, those that are kind of completely denying are most likely are really challenged with now getting on the hook. While those who accommodated this, for example, by building up an AI program, incentivizing, so to say, central activities in the company by also giving the funding to the teams, by giving expertise to the team, where then the security team hooks into that, are most likely to have the better overview and in that sense also build up the right processes. And I would like to add one more point in this regard is, as a security team, as a governance team, we struggle to build up the right policy. A policy will always be somewhat wrong. We are not advising them go forward, but we are somewhat holding them back. But by having the AI program and by getting the response from it, by having the close interaction with the team, you can level your policy also. Is it too strict? Is it too weak?
Yep.
That you see instant feedback there from the group.
Yep. That's a key point. I just want to basically just plus one it. And by saying that this is, if that process runs quickly, you win. If that process includes a review every year, you lose.
So Anton, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about architectural differences as we look at shadow AI. Interestingly, we all know the shared responsibility model in cloud. Yep. And looking at AI, there's actually cloud deployments. You can have AI in IaaS, right? You can have AI as a SaaS. How does that impact the risk model? So, and should that maybe be a good guide to people where they need to start shining the light first? What's the priority with the risk?
I've seen this come up, but mostly for actual authorized AI projects.
Okay.
When there's a question about what risk the operator carries, what risk the model maker carries, what risk the foundational model maker carries, what risk the hoster carries. So to me, if I go and revisit some of the stuff, some of the writing we've done on the shared responsibility, a lot of this does look like cloud with some nuance because there are more players. It's not, if you imagine the classic, blue-brown picture, cloud customer does this, cloud provider does this. There are two parties. In reality, it's more complex, but for AI, it's almost always more complex. But to me, for Shadow AI, I feel like there's a big area where nobody's responsible. And the challenge isn't that how you share, the challenge is unearth stuff which is on the floor in terms of responsibility division, right? It dropped on the floor, nobody owns it. So to me, it's the areas of maybe irresponsibility where I would focus, not necessarily in how to divide the visible pieces.
I mean, if definitionally it's in the shadow and we don't see it, how do we see it, John? Like,
But I'm going to go back to something that Anton just said. I mean, this issue of shared responsibility, who owns it, is a big deal right now in most companies. Is it, and then every single client that we have has a AI working group that has two people that kind of know it pretty well, two people that are kind of faking it, and then 3 or 4 that don't know anything. And it's like muddling around, and sometimes the legal person's the person that knows everything and use cases and all that, and it's the IT person that doesn't know it. And mixing Gen AI and AGI and all the ML and all the metaphors together. So I think this is a starting point is like, hey, who owns what, and what do we do, and what do you contribute? The one thing I would just also caution everybody, and this veers into the policy world, is, understand that right now we don't have any laws in the United States, really, to speak of for this. So that boilerplate statement in every policy that we will adhere to all state and federal regulations and laws, well, there aren't any right here now. And so that's part of the challenge, is there is a vacuum. And by the way, the AI risk framework from NIST is not a law. So throw that one in there too.
And you have to look for people who read the whole document. Was it like 82 pages or was it 882?
I did, and
you did? Oh,
it's the business case for ChatGPT.
So
it is.
not you.
It is. Woo! That's a lot of fun there. Reading. How many people have read the NIST AI risk framework?
The whole thing?
Yeah,
The whole
it's
thing.
a bravo. Stand up. No, joking. It is. It's very dry. Actually, the annexes are pretty good if you can get to them. But yeah, I mean that's your sole guidance here as you're trying to interpret and manage the risk. Is this entirely dry document that's 82 pages long? So there you
All
go.
right, Michael, who's in charge?
Yes, let me bring in the European perspective, so to say. So you hear where I'm going.
You do have an act, right?
Yes, we do have an act, and it's not only the AI Act, which gives a good frame, and important to say. I mean, there was always beforehand, there was, when there were discussions about European Parliament discussing on the AI Act, it was like, okay, will they tighten it down, so no innovation anymore? No, they did not, and I think I'm really convinced they did a good job, which also gives the right balance to the companies to judge on what is a high risk, what is a not acceptable risk, and so forth. It gives really some good guidance. But I would like to combine this with some other aspect which is something which really is a topic which goes into the direction of data sovereignty, data safety, and that comes correlated with the GDPR. So if you have the thing, GDPR demands that you have a purpose for your data, clearly defined. If you put this into the stochastical system of an AI, what's the purpose? It's lost out of a sudden. So, and if you have a model which is trained on the data coming in, then you have a problem. So the shared responsibility model out of a sudden brings not only a problem to the vendor, but also to the provider of the model. So that's a really sensible part to look at.
So what's the thinking here? Do we need a CAISO? Should we have, or a KO? I've heard these thrown. I was on a panel about the CA officer manifesto. Do we need an AI security officer? What's your thinking? Anton, what do you think? Do we need a CAISO? Do we need a CISO for AI?
I'm nervous suggesting a new highly paid executive, right? I mean, I think that it's reasonable that
Do you
the
have an
responsibility
issue
is.
with highly paid executives?
I have an issue with having a domain, having a new executive that doesn't do any work.
Yeah, do we need another one? Yeah,
Yes.
no. What will
Yeah,
work? Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah.
But at the same time, again, back to shadow AI versus officially adopted AI, right? Whether there's a one person driving this, whether it's a CIO, a CTO, or perhaps for a security vendor, maybe even a CISO sometimes.
Right.
I can't imagine having a senior most person for shadow AI. It must be the lawyer. I can't imagine who else can it be, right?
You're the DPO, like the person who's serving as the privacy officer.
So to me, it veers pretty quickly out of my area of comfort, frankly. So
Yeah. Okay. I know that's fair. So
Yeah.
you see this really as the shadow. One of the big problems is the data and the data risks with it.
Data risks, but also the
Yeah.
adoption types and
Yeah.
use cases and sort of rogue actions in case of
Yeah.
agents. I was the first to say agents. How about that? I get a drink. So,
Ding, 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 ding.
so
I think John might have said. Somebody said
okay,
agentic.
then fine.
Yeah.
Oh, he said agentic. Oh, that's even better.
So John, I mean, yeah. What are your thoughts on? Is will having somebody in charge of this mean less shadow? I mean, you talked about just not banning it is going to lead to less shadow, right? Allowing people. So does that mean we make a single-threaded owner, or is it too pervasive in organizations?
I don't think we know. I mean, I
Okay.
really don't know. And I mean, this is playing out across corporate America. And it's interesting, again, as a consultant, seeing multiple environments, small business, public sector, private sector, they're doing everything right now. No, there's not. The one thing that I would say is very interesting that I would advise clients is like the analysts right now are learning this too. And like at least one of them has come out with pretty strong statements on certain things. I'm like, they don't know this either. You know, there's this moments where you kind of get it on a call, like, no, you know, not to pick on one of them, but I won't even say it. But sometimes clients rely exclusively on that advice.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would actually look more to your industries. And what I mean by that is your industry is different. We're all worried about data loss, and yes, data security loss, but we haven't had it yet. But that issue where you have a consequential decision that's made by that mission critical app because it takes the results from an API and it shuts down service. I strongly believe if you look at all of this AI from the standpoint of what could bring your business down, and you have this small API call to ChatGPT, let's look at that really closely because that has an impact that outweighs everything we talk about, including data loss.
So, John, sort of staying on that point, I know both you and Anton have really interesting stories of what can go wrong with shadow AI. I just wanted, before we get to those, I wanted to remind everybody, they're doing a great job. But if there is a question that you have, we are here as a panel. So the main thing we can do is answer your questions, not just the ones we came up with in advance. So if anybody has a question, please go on up to the mic. And while you're getting ready for that, we're going to let Anton tell one story before the first question, which is about malware via fake AI apps.
Yeah, there was just the headlines occasionally just write themselves. And while I was looking for some juicy story that is newer than the classic data theft story, there was somebody who said that downloaded malware masquerading as a new Gen AI tool you can use for work, right? It's in the headlines. But which is to me a quintessential mix of classic risks of downloading an untrusted executable, forget AI, and the current draw of like, oh my God, I get an edge on my employees who use AI without authorization for using even better AI, and of course also without authorization. So let me grab this tool quickly before other interns
so sort of-
get it.
Interns.
Same book, different page kind of thing with the coming down and the
Yes,
malware.
correct.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
it reminds us that all the old stuff is still there, and
Yeah.
not really the topic of this, but sometimes you go guard against prompt injection, but SQL injection gets you, right?
Right.
2007 comes up and says, hello, you're owned.
Yeah. Okay. If you have a panelist that you'd like to respond, please let us know. If it's just for the whole panel, that's great too.
John,
Yes.
good afternoon.
Good
my name is
afternoon.
Paulo Porfírio. I'm also a consultant, and I work with ISO 27001, 27701. I help companies certifying. Now, back in 2023, I was very surprised because that's not how ISO works usually, but they launched a standard, ISO 42001. which is about AI. And if you want to show the market, the industry, the stakeholders that you use AI responsibly, you can get certified against these standards. So you know how 27001 works, right? This would be, of course, it's not going to resolve all the issues that you guys have been talking about, say, shadow AI, but I think that it can be a very good help if you bring that piece to the chessboard. If you get certified against 42001 to prove your stakeholders in the market, your board, that we use AI responsibly, how do you do? What is your opinion?
First of all, thank you. I learned something. I didn't know that. I would say that I'm an AppSec guy by background, application security, the least consumed of all the security disciplines. I have a career of trying to get CISOs to do more of it. And I would say, unfortunately, ISO is probably in that category where every organization should be doing more of it. I mean, honestly, if it could somewhat get adopted into the new NIST, or I was to say, maybe I was to make a joke about CVEs, but like they don't exist anymore, I guess.
They do again.
No, they do again. Okay,
They
woo!
do
That
again.
was
The
close.
fund's
Other
Yeah.
versions,
back.
multiple
No.
versions.
But what I would say in all seriousness is I think there are a lot of competing standards to which to adhere right now. It's a little bit of the Wild Wild West. And I would love to talk to you afterwards to find out where, but really I've yet to see that in my personal experience. But we would love it because everyone's trying to figure out what the true north is. And what we're seeing right now a little bit is some industry standard stuff around, like, for example, the electrical industry is starting to like coalesce on standards, not standards, bad word, around practices for AI. For example, what do we not want? We don't want AI to make a consequential decision about electrical distribution, for example, in Texas in August, for example. And so I just would say, like, the industry standards, if you can get ISO to be at least referenced and adopted by the industry groups, that would be, I think, wildly helpful. Because how many people remember security frameworks, just generic security frameworks, what people did 15 years ago before NIST came out with the CSF? The first 20 minutes of every security conversation was like, what standard do you adhere to? Well, it's a little bit of PCI with this, with that, ISO, two tablespoons of ISO and this and that. So like,
853.
oh yeah, that too. Throw that in there. But the point being is, like, we need something to which everybody adheres or at least references, and I don't see that yet, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So keep doing whatever you're doing.
At least this one is international, right?
No, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, do you have a question?
Me? Oh, yeah. I would love to hear you guys talk through connecting Shadow AI to actual business risks and threat
Okay.
actors. Like, if I have an IC that is using ChatGPT,
Yeah.
Assuming I've managed principal of least privilege correctly, which is an assumption, can they really do damage by putting my business data into a personal ChatGPT account? Do I really think OpenAI is going to get hacked and that data is going to come out somehow and get to my competitors? Anyway, I'm hand waving here, but
All right.
how do you connect
All right.
Shadow AI to bad things happening?
Michael, is it really a risk? And then we'll get to you next.
That's a very good question. I mean, first of all, you alluded on the security aspect of this being hacked. The angle that I would take is the safety aspect. And the safety aspect I mentioned beforehand. So out of a sudden, yes, I mean, if you pass by the governance process, that means there might be personal information in that you don't want to see in there. There might be out of a sudden in this model, so to say, there might be facts in that, maybe you would not want to see in there, especially when you're using customer data, for example, where normally you need a purpose. But that I understand, and we were touching on that the US does not have a regulation or tight regulation or laws in place there. So I'm a little bit refraining from this coming from the point from the European perspective.
Yeah.
So I wonder how
Right.
John...
What should you
So-
worry
wait,
about?
hold
Okay,
on.
go,
Let's
go,
let
Anton.
Anton, I mean, truly, like, how do we say to our boards, Shadow AI is a business risk? I mean, how would we define this?
I mean, at this point, we already have, with consumer-grade tools, it's probably easier because there are already cases where this happened, and not through any kind of hack, but through the fact that consumer-grade models learn from prompts, which means all the code your developer put in, it can be used to improve somebody else's code, like, for example, his. So that's not really anything hypothetical. I think the headlines from this are from 2023, and consumer models, consumer grade tools do that by charter, and that's seen as okay, and it seems as actually quite helpful for consumer use cases. So if you have a model that learns from prompts, it would learn from your code, right? So that's why when, as I sometimes joke, there's a 3 a.m. Question, hey Anton, what's one thing to do, is you cut it out with consumer grade tools for business. You use consumer grade tools to plan your 6-year-old party. I do, that's great, everything's fine. But if you use it for business, whether it's coding or writing or anything else, then you would use a model that does not learn from prompts. And every provider of these models would be happy to offer you that. But it's the confusion between consumer grade and enterprise or business grade would be my first test. And the risks of consumer grade are very obvious. And again, it's more of a news headline, and it has nothing to do with OpenAI being hacked.
Mm. Yeah, Michael, you want to?
Yeah, maybe one more thing that I just looked here to my notes. There's one quite interesting statistic from Harmonic that I got, and they did an investigation on the prompts being there put into the OpenAI, and the numbers that they were saying, in 8.5% there is sensitive data in it, and from this 8.5% there were customer data was predominant, but also highly sensitive information. So you mentioned the coding, but even what they were coming up in the statistic was, for example, firewall rules and alike. So if there is a case of a breach, well, good night.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, okay, let me throw one other thing in there. Just being more aware of, on top of customer data, operational data that might go out with, I'll give you an example. Just by happenstance, I know that 3 large transportation companies were doing Microsoft Copilot proofs of concepts at the same time. And those are all sanctioned and probably regulated by contracts and probably enforced by contracts, right? However, at one point I was just like, wow, who knows more about flying, airplanes than the 3 of them? Maybe, in theory, when all that data gets aggregated. That's an extreme example, but in general, one of the risks of shadow AI is you lose operational data that's benign but is interesting to somebody. The other one is bias. It's like, you feed these models and you actually accidentally show biases within the business that can then have reputational risks for the organization. So it's like a weird, different thing. I also would argue, I don't think we've had a major breach level massive thing yet. It's going to happen. It's going to happen where we have something that's an event like that.
Backdoored models.
Yeah.
That's another one that's not so much shadow AI, but more backdoored models on market spaces. Yeah.
Looking at if we define shadow IT, AI being part of IT, right? It's anything that isn't properly governed. And so here's a clear one. MLflow is an open source way to manage your AI within your organization. It had a vulnerability about 18 months ago that led to a remote code execution. That meant that you could have taken over the server. You could have dumped the data on the server. If you had access remotely, potentially you could have taken over even the model potentially. And also the models tend to have a lot of access to really critical data, so it's possible it could have been used as a beachhead to get to that critical data. So there's something that's very real. How do you eliminate that? You bring it out of the shadows, you scan it, you bring it into your vulnerability management program, and you patch it when a vulnerability like that is found. But a lot of companies were not even scanning MLflow as a tool in their organization as part of vulnerability management. So I think that's a very clear way to say, yes, shadow AI. Is it the same as like somebody just adopted ChatGPT without telling us? No, but it's a very clear, very direct line that you can show, and you can turn that into something that could be a clear risk justification with your organization, with your C-suite or your board. So,
Thanks.
was that helpful?
I appreciate that. I
Okay.
still feel like it's really probabilistic, whereas compared to an AppSec bug, where I have this AppSec bug, if it gets exploited by my competitor or organized crime or something, my data is absolutely going out my organization, no question. Whereas if it goes into ChatGPT, is it really going to get out of there? If my PII is in there, is it really going to leak out? Like that's
Well,
a
let
big
me
squishy maybe.
Let me answer that question. As being AppSec since 2004, we're in 2004 with AI. I mean, we really don't know yet. I mean, we don't have those ones. I think it's still a very immature world and business. And like I said, the learning curve by all these people that are trying to manage it. And ironically, I think the best people that are suited for it are AppSec folks that understand systems and software, but like we're not at that point yet where we fully know. I do believe there is one of these things about to happen, just because I see a lot of bad practices, and the attacker community is going to figure out where to connect the dots soon, I think.
I mean, there was already the famous one. There was the large electrical company where the electronics company where the tech team was trying to write some tech release notes, and they put information about an unreleased system into one of the public foundation models. And the reason they found out that, and then they banned AI for a while, which they unbanned, but the reason they found out was that their competitors' techs were using the same model and were trying to write their own specs, and they got the other company's specs out for unreleased products. So yeah, I mean, it's as John said, we don't have quite that. I mean, we still are struggling for hard metrics in AppSec, but there are certainly some good examples of, yes, data has gone missing.
But this is 2023, the one that I mentioned in passing, and you mentioned again, also in passing, the same probably case, the same case, which, and I think that has it had peers, just less media attention, so they haven't more than once.
Right, yeah, exactly. So,
Awesome.
So
Thank you, guys.
Hopefully that was helpful. Okay, yes.
Thank you. I'm here.
Okay.
First off, thank you so much.
Oh, I apologize. So the light is shining right in my eyes. I did
thought
not know there was
so.
anybody on that side. So my sincere apologies. So,
No worries.
yeah.
I thought it's going to be a long day for me standing, but joking. Thank you so much for bringing up the nice discussion, actually, to the panel. My question is more to Anton, essentially, to tickle his analyst brain again. So we briefly talked about the risk management frameworks, ISO 42001, NIST, and whatsoever are coming in as well, Microsoft's RMF as well. Have you thought about presence of too many frameworks versus absence of a singularity of a framework? What are the risks?
I'll just go with his take, namely that when people used to ask me, what's the best practice for X? My response is, we haven't done X enough. I don't know. We haven't practiced it enough to know what's best. So with frameworks, my answer is the same. The frameworks typically follow some number of years of practicing, so then best practices become encoded in the framework. At this point, we largely don't know what's best, and so every framework that claims to have best practices would be a little suspect. And I'll give a very, very self-serving example, a very Google-serving example in this case, where somebody wrote some kind of headline about like how there's this new amazing craft of AI red teaming that is very different from classic AppSec red teaming. And I read the article and I remember that, I remember that. I read that Google started an AI red team in 2017, which did largely that thing. And it was sort of like 8 years ago. So for some people, some of the new stuff is really not new, but it is new for the world. And so even for us, some things we may know what are good and what is bad. But for a community at large, often the answer is, who knows? We haven't done it enough.
I mean, one of the reasons we come to places like RSA is to look each other in the eye and say, what are you seeing? What are you seeing out there? What are you hearing? What are you doing? Oh, okay, that's interesting. I didn't thought about that. I mean, like literally, the good news is you're on the bleeding edge of it. The bad news is it's real lonely.
That's pretty fair enough. Rightly said. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, that side of the room, and now I see that there's, is it your turn? Okay, please.
I wanted to ask a question that I hope might bring some optimism to the conversation. And I have been thinking about how, as a security industry, we have done hard things before. And I think about 10 years ago, like maybe on this exact stage, people were talking about BYOD as if it was people bringing portable hand grenades into their office environment.
That's right.
And for a while it was chaos, and then we got through it, and we have come to a place where we faced a overwhelming social mandate with a lot of pragmatic solutions, and I think people are pretty happy with what we have compromised. Whether it's that the organization has to pay for your cell phone in order for you to bring it in, and then you can download your management system on it. do you see comparisons like that to AI now? And what do you see in terms of a timeline? If to John's point, we're in 2004 right now, what optimistic timelines do you think we have to look forward to for us to get our arms around this problem?
Can we go faster, Michael?
Yes.
Okay, faster, that's a call. Quick point on that, completely with you. And indeed, it's kind of a challenging situation, but I think in the CISO role, you would not go for the role, right? That's point number one. There is one slight little difference that I see. When back then, for example, we were talking about cloud SaaS adoption and so forth, everyone was like, yeah, I tried this out, okay, and board was pushing towards it, but we were not clear what is the cloud. Also with BYD, it was not that everyone was adopting it at scale. The slight little difference is here that the AI topic is very much a board topic. I mean, you said it. If you don't have it in your strategy, most likely in 10 years your name will not be known anymore. And that's a little bit an additional push, but we will master this.
Why does Shadow AI exist? It's CEO fear of missing out. That's why.
Yeah, that's true. Very fast. Okay, so we have room for this panel has prepared a wrap for you guys with awesome advice. So after this question, we're going to go to the wrap.
Oh man, I hope I didn't steal the thunder, but my question is for John and the rest of the panel. But John said, you know, there is successful adoption of AI right now. So I'm curious from the panel standpoint, what are those things that we can implement right now that you would deem, hey, this is a great implementation? And obviously, you know, we have shadow AI everywhere with our vendors adding AI without even our consent, like, oh, here's AI, and it's not approved, it just rolls out. So I'm curious how you guys would do.
I'd just say the pattern of goodness at this point is a very brief policy that is brief and well understood and widely accepted and followed. A small group coterie of people that are energized and are looking for positive use cases of it and are broadly aware of the upsides and downsides of it, and the fact that it's aligned with what the CEO and the management team are doing. And they, you know, now it's a cliche from 2023, companies with AI are going to beat companies without AI. So I believe that to be the case. We're at an incredible, you know, kind of juncture here. So you should do it well, and it can be done well.
All right, thank you. Okay, Anton, you told me you had a 6-minute wrap. We have 10 minutes. Do you think maybe you can do it in 3.5?
I'll do mine short. So I'm going to very briefly turn to a boring subject of governance, and you probably would all be disappointed if I say, well, yeah, you should do governance better, blah, blah, blah. So I asked Gemini how to really shape it into some kind of a pithy one-liner, and Gemini delivered in this case. It created a framework called Enable, Guide, and Guard, and I really love it, and the credit goes all to the AI overlords. So to me, when I think of good governance for this era, you have to sort of address the purpose why employees are doing it. So enable, meaning there's an approved tool, there's a well-lighted path to using AI. Guide part is that if people prefer not to do it, you gently correct them. There's education, there's technical controls, there's DLP, there's other things. So, and then of course, final third part, guard, would be you do deploy some controls, and I'm not pointing at Protect AI necessarily, but at startups and large technology providers who deliver AI security tools, which allow both discovery and protection. So that's why instead of saying do governance better, I would say enable, guide, and guard as my approach to getting this under control and deploying it without killing the risk. I can of course quote Sundar, who says bold and responsible, but ultimately it's a manifestation of bold and responsible.
All right, thank you. John, you had 2, is that right? 2 wraps?
I think I've already used all my wraps, all the
Okay.
clever things. No,
But
I
you get a
would
new
just,
one then.
I would just say, for those who are in the middle of it, I'm assuming besides the 8 people that didn't put their hands up, you're here for a reason. You're probably in the middle of this. What we didn't really talk about was the detection part of this.
Right.
The good news is it's noisy. This is not like, you know, covert channels and steganography, and like you're not going to be able to, you're going to be able to find this, and it's not as simple as asking your EDR vendor, your CASB vendor. It can be done. It's whatever, but you should do this because that's what your executives want. They want to make sure it's not, you know, wild, wild west out there. So again, this is like other things that we've tackled in the industry, cloud, software, BYOD. This can be done in a safe and secure fashion, and I would encourage you guys to, you know, to move as quickly as you can.
Yeah. But you should couple discovery with not having a ban, because if you have a ban, it moves to personal mobile devices, screenshots, and you lost.
I was picking, sorry, this is my second take.
I
The
wanna
reason, like I have come across several clients who banned, AI Companion for Zoom or all the different, because it, mischaracterizes conversations, but it sends this weird message to everybody, and that gives them an excuse. Like, I'd love to do this, but, so that's the other thing is don't do the, thou shall not do this. If you come up with that policy, in a uncertain world, employees might just do something differently.
Yeah.
I just so strongly agree with that, and what the member of the audience said too is like, I mean, that is the bright spot. Have the conversation with people. Instead, people run into the shadows for two reasons. Something was they're told they can't do it, right, and then they're like, oh, I gotta hide it, or they just don't know how to do it right, and they're trying to. This is an old story, but back when I was an auditor. We were doing an assessment on a company, and somebody had written a developer had written their own crypto. And it was terrible. It was just an XOR. And we were like, why? Well, they were trying so hard to do the right thing. They didn't know there was an approved crypto library. They didn't know how to implement it. So let people know. AI is welcome here. These are the use cases. This is how we're adopting it. We're experimenting with it. All right, Michael, you be our last wrap, please.
Thank you so much. And I'm really picking up on that. And what was my mission, so to say, to leave you here with is a picture in mind. The picture of a rowing boat, where you have 5-6 people who have the paddle in hand, and they paddle. And now with the AI coming, they paddle a little bit more energetic, more frenetic, so to say, and they know what they are doing. They want to get to somewhere. But if you look at a rowing boat, you have the paddlers, so to say. I hope this is translated well to English. And you have the navigator. The navigator sits on the other side of the boat, so to say, and that person, he or she, looks forward into the direction where they are paddling. So let you be and continue to be the navigator, where you give the path. They are going anyhow that direction, and the question is, are you part of that or not? So do well on all the stuff that you were doing beforehand, whether it's the vulnerability assessments. You can incorporate this also to assess AI, just with some new information, new knowledge, so to say, incorporating. Vulnerability management, all of that goes in, but give the right direction, but let them also go in the somewhat direction that you can steer a bit.
Thank you. I can't think of a better, more positive way to end on this. Michael Bernhardt, John Dixon, Anton Shuvakin, thank you so much. Please give them a hand.